2-minute preview from the Huskies Warming House podcast, going to be a lot longer than 2 minutes today, and rightfully so, Nick. The St. Cloud State Huskies have earned their first ever Frozen Four championship appearance in school history, taking on the UMass Minutemen, who won in pretty glorious fashion, similar to the Huskies, with a clawing back in that third period and winning in overtime off of a beautiful wraparound tap-in for the game winner in OT there. This UMass team, I got to be honest with you, Nick, as I bring you along into the show here, they're a group that reminds me of Mankato on steroids a little bit, with a little bit even stronger defensive posture. They're a well-coached group, and I know that we mentioned a couple weeks ago that coming into the regional, even though they were kind of unbeaten, they really hadn't impressed a whole lot. They kind of remind me a little bit of the 2017 Ottawa Senators, where they're not flashy. They're not, they're a little bit more offensively gifted, I think, than the Senators were, but they're just a group that just silently and sneakily wears you down. And the Huskies, I think, are going to have a little bit of trouble this game if they, kind of play into UMass's style. And how do they get out of that is the real question.
100%. But before we get to that discussion, Noah, I have to kind of pause because I'm going to open the inbox for those UMD fans or the NCAA hockey fans that thought UMD had a shoe into the championship. Here, I'll give it a second. No? Oh, okay. So, as we said, right, you have to go out and win a hockey game. And sure enough, look what UMass did. 100%. UMass is a very dangerous hockey team. Number one, they are fast. They are a very, very fast team. The other thing that really impressed me about their game yesterday against Duluth is they were physical, too. They were not afraid to throw the weight around. I just think that the combination of their speed plus their willingness to play the body just eventually wore down Duluth in that overtime period, Noah. Again, it's a second period, so it's the long change. Duluth was caught at least 3 times where they had shifts a minute and a half, almost 2 minutes. And unfortunately, in these types of situations, you and I both know this very well, that's going to come back to bite you. So unfortunately for Duluth, it was an end to another successful season. Did not get to 4 straight national championship games, but I mean, what a run that team had, honestly. And again, we know that they will probably be back at this stage next season, but it is UMass and the Huskies. And I think, as you mentioned, with UMass, the way they play, we'll discuss this a little bit further too. It could give the Huskies a lot of fits if they're not careful, especially in their own defensive zone.
Yeah, I think where you have to start and going back, I know someone mentioned online about the Huskies still trying to be better in the face-off dot, and it was kind of funny. They said, well, they need to work on that for Saturday. Part of me is like, you got one day, you're not improving in the face-off circle. But no. I mean, there are strategic things that you can do. But going back to the Huskies, the biggest preparation that St. Cloud State has to have for UMass is looking internally and looking at the things that they did well and didn't do well, and that's being the Huskies in the game against Mankato. One of the things that you have to know right off out of the bat here, or out of the gate, I should say, goodness gracious, is that St. Cloud State, if they play like they did in the second half of that hockey game against the Mavericks, they will not win a national championship. They won't, So St. Cloud, they survived. They got through a little bit of rockiness in the second half of that game, but they got away from their identity that made them so successful in the first half against Mankato. And that identity, again, is the team that's the aggressor, the team that's on the forecheck. I think about, again, we keep going back to him, but he's been so noticeable for this Huskies team over the past month, and that's Zach Okabe. And you see guys in similar fashion, your Yami Kranilas, guys that are kind of buzzsaws when they come into the offensive zone. And that's where St. Cloud, they move from being that run and gun, quick strike on the rush team to being a group that can dump the puck in and grind down and wear and tear. But when St. Cloud is not making those plays, not making those simple chips off the glass, getting pucks in deep, they start to get in trouble, because then, as we noticed, they were playing that 1-2-2 trap against Mankato, right? That's well and dandy if you're dumping the puck and going off for a line change. But if you're playing the 1-2-2 trap specifically because you're not generating any offense on those dump-ins, that's a problem. And I think in the second half of the game, that's where St. Cloud really ended up. And you can't do that against a team like UMass, which we're going to touch on this as well. Some of their statistics and their leading goal scorers, they're deadly if you give them that time and space to wheel and deal out of their own defensive zone.
Right, and to touch on that point, though, because you brought up a really good point about the neutral zone, right? One of the things that I really noticed too was, we talked about, I should say, I talked about Nick Perbix and how he could be that spark to kind of turn the tides if the Huskies were getting pinned. There were a couple of times where he made a really good first decision, right, where he carried the puck out, but then he decided to skate it into traffic, and instead of getting to the red line and just hoisting it deep and just living to fight another day, looking like he was trying to stick handle through two or three guys. There was a couple of neutral zone turnovers where, again, for Mankato, they turned those over into odd man rushes against the Minutemen. Those are going to end up in the back if you're not careful. So again, you talk about just keeping to your identity. That's the thing, is just making those smart plays and not trying to do too much in those situations, especially with things maybe aren't going your way here, as hockey games do have those ebbs and flows.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to force plays, especially in a national championship game. And like we talked about, you mentioned Nick Perbix and kind of him trying to do too much. I know there's a fine line here because the game of hockey has really changed to where you want to possess the puck. You don't want to give the puck up as much as you can, but you also have to situationally know when is the right time to dump a puck in or when is the right time to, try and carry the puck. I go back to actually an analysis that was made during the Mankato game in Mankato's side there when St. Cloud was playing their 1-2-2 trap, if you will. It's not really a trap. It's just it's a forecheck. It was a passive 1-2-2 was really what it was. But you kind of look at the defensemen and the forward that are backing up for St. Cloud and Mankato. They found success in the second half of the game by just little chips, little floats, and creating 2-on-1s on the entry instead of rimming the puck around the glass. That's what you have to do against this Minutemen team. They are so good at grabbing a 1-0 lead or a 2-1 lead, and then they lock down defensively. And they're not a group that I think about, a group that's like North Dakota, for example, where they just try to continually, if they're up in a game, they try to continually suffocate you with offense. UMass doesn't do that. They're just so balanced in terms of, again, taking what is given. They're so well coached. And Nick, maybe this is a good point to maybe take a look at UMass and kind of their roster a little bit, some guys to watch out for. First of all, Bobby Trevino. I mean, he's their leading scorer, coming in 33 points on the year. He's deadly, and he's a guy that's going to have to be watched. But you look at this lineup here, and one of the things that I always look for when you pull up a stat sheet, you can go online to the UMass website and take a look at who they've got, in terms of their points. I always look to see, you're going to have your Bobby Trevinos, your Oliver Childs that are going to be, your kind of upper tier, upper echelon goal scorers. I look to see where the middle of the pack is. Where are they in relation to the bottom scores versus your top scores? Middle of the pack here, Nick, your leading scorer in Bobby Trevino, 33 points. You've got guys in here, Josh Lapina, 23 points, 22 points, 24 points, 20 points, 17 points. So you've got guys that are in this healthy mix where that tells me they are not a top 3 or a top 6 heavy team. They are a deep team with at least 3 full lines that are going to find a way to generate offense. And Nick, I want to kick it over to you. St. Cloud, if we've seen any lapses this year, it has been on the defensive side of the puck. What does UMass do so well, and how does St. Cloud State counter that offense with guys like Bobby Trevino, Oliver Chow? Luckily, Carson Geiswitz is out for UMass as far as we know. We'll touch on that in a little bit here too. But you got a couple of high-octane players that know how to get the job done.
First of all, to your point, 100%, this is a team that wins by committee. And you talk about a St. Cloud's club, they also win by committee, right? Mm-hmm. So it's one of those very evenly distributed rosters where it's going to be quite the Goliath battle between these two clubs tomorrow. But UMass actually does really well. It actually reminds me a lot of what North Dakota does in the offensive zone. Their D are incredibly active. And not only are they just active in terms of stepping up, but they're carrying the puck in. There's a lot of switching. They'll go in behind the net in the offensive side of the puck. They just look to suffocate, and they're very much an East Coast style team where to them it's all about the puck possession and just wearing you down by making you defend for sustained periods of time. And to me, that's what killed Duluth last night, was just way too much time in their own zone. And unfortunately, Duluth unable to, again, when you have tired legs, you got to go off for a change, especially in the second period as well in the OT. When it's a long change, you can't really go in and get that quick break and they get a full line change out. So to me, UMass is just the type of team, but when they smell blood, they're going to go in just like the boa constrictor, and they're going to tie you up, and they're going to just shrink every little bit around you. So for St. Cloud, how do you defend that, right? Again, when in doubt, get it out. It sounds like the big cliche, but if you can get the puck out of your zone, that's the big one. At least it'll alleviate the pressure somewhat. Number 2, when we go back to Nick Perbix, right? Because again, he can be that guy that, if there's not any entry or, exit passes. You have to be able to learn to skate the puck. Two, you're going to have that close support away from the puck. Again, I don't think you can spread out this Minutemen team wide. You're going to have close support. Guys coming through the middle. It's going to be strong side support. And like I said, little float plays, maybe little chips off the boards. It's going to have to be that type of breakout strategy to get the puck at least to the red line, dump it, and then send in your F1.
I'm glad you mentioned actually the breakout strategy. One of the things, especially in the second half of yesterday's game, that St. Cloud got away from, of course, we're recording this on Friday here, is that I thought the forwards for St. Cloud were too low in their defensive zone. They weren't covering the points. They were starting to float down. And as a winger, you're taught to stay on your man, but especially if you're on the weak side, you have a tendency to want to float down when the play is staying below the top of the circles. You feel like you're not doing anything. You feel like you're not covering. You feel like you're not helping out your teammates. And that's where, when Nick Perbix gets the puck or Nick Perbix is defending and Will Hammer is the centerman who's helping out in the corner, as a winger there, you got to, if you're Jared Cockrell, for example, you just got to stay where you are. You got to trust your teammates in that process, because this St. Cloud State team still has a lot of speed. And one of the things that when you mentioned UMass activating their defensemen, that's a ripe opportunity to create a turnover. A guy like Yami Kranila, Zach Okabe, Vieti Miettinen, guys with a lot of speed that if you create that turnover, you've got an odd man rush really quickly because you have a UMass team that is so willing to pinch down the wall. You can have that chip or that float, but that doesn't happen if UMass knows that the defensemen have free reign up above the top of the circles because the forwards are floating down. I noticed that in St. Cloud's game, and I think that the forwards, if they can clean that up, they've got great opportunities to create some of those odd man rushes and pop a couple of goals here. So Nick, I know we have a couple of housekeeping things as far as fans going to the game are concerned. We're going to touch on that in the end, but before we get to that, I want to know, if you are St. Cloud State, what is your offensive and your defensive key to the game for St. Cloud State to come out with their first national championship in school history?
Offensive key number one is you got to get pucks through. And it sounds simple, but the Minutemen were just throwing and sacrificing their body in every single minute of that hockey game. I don't think I've seen Duluth that frustrated in the offensive zone almost all year. The Minutemen, and part of the reason why they can do that is, again, they have everybody in that roster that can skate. And so you're not going to get a very big or a long window to get shots through. If you see it, you have to take it. And again, it doesn't have to be a heavy shot. Sometimes, look what the Noah Walker. Yeah, Seamus Donahue, you see it as a slapper. It wasn't necessarily a harder shot, but he's in the right spot, puts the stick on the puck, and it goes over the shoulder of Dryden McKay. So that to me is going to be important. Number two, defensively, you're going to have to make the ice in front of David Rennick a no-fly zone. This Minutemen team, just as much as they were in the defensive zone, offensively, there's guys parked in front of State's Call all night, and they're going to be doing the same thing to David Rennick. And so they do really well, second and third chance opportunities. And when, just like Mankato, the Minutemen like to generate that offense from low to high, and more so if it's down below the goalie, you'll see four people collapsing on the slot, really just making chaos in front. It's going to be very, very tough for David Rennick to track bodies, track the puck. So for defensively, Huskies got to make sure they just stay a stick on man. You cannot have separation. Don't try to just take up space.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And hopefully David Rennick continues his strong play. He was part of the reason the Huskies stayed in that hockey game. He played very, very well and has had a very good month of March and April as well. My defensive key for St. Cloud State right now, urgency. I think that one of the downfalls, I don't want to say downfalls, but when St. Cloud is not playing their best, their breakouts are really poor because their defensemen are not willing to get a puck and just make a decision. Regardless of if you're going off the glass, you're snapping that first pass to the defenseman and you're deciding to carry it. Make the play that you're going to make and go with it. And you just kind of have to own it. Obviously, make sure it's a smart play. Don't be reversing the puck back behind the net. Try to go north-south as much as you can. But I think St. Cloud, their breakouts have to be clean. Don't give UMass any opportunity to create those second and third chance opportunities off of the forecheck. Get the puck up the ice, get it out of the zone, take it zone by zone. On the offensive side of the puck, St. Cloud, shoot the darn puck. And they have so many good goal scorers. And every time they enter the zone, especially if you're in a tie hockey game with 9 minutes left in the third period, you've got to be willing to shoot pucks. There's nothing wrong with a puck on net. Obviously, if you have an opportunity for a good zone entry with numbers, take it, take advantage of that. Wear and tear, enter with as many numbers and puck possession as you can, but don't pass up an opportunity to shoot the puck. We've seen this St. Cloud group so many times, as if you've got traffic in front, as you mentioned, that shot has to get through and create some havoc. That has kind of been the MO of St. Cloud in the past 2 months right now, is those greasy garbage pan goals. You've got to start to create more of those opportunities if you're the Huskies, and I think they'll be just fine if they can do that. But they got to come out like a buzzsaw. Their start has to be strong. I thought it was on Thursday. Their finish was a little lackluster, something we haven't seen in quite a while. They did escape, obviously, with a beautiful redirect by Nolan Walker there. And again, response to adversity was really nice. But St. Cloud, what a time to finally put together the first full 60 minutes of the season, in my personal opinion there. So, Nick, for fans going to the game, I know some people have gotten some plane tickets. As far as the arena is concerned, if they're jumping into PPG Paints Arena for the first time, what should they expect? And what are some apparel things that maybe they should be watching out for if they feel like they want to buy some things?
Absolutely. Number one, PPG Paints Arena is a gorgeous arena, right? Very similar setup to the X. It's open concourses, so if you're walking, trying to get some stuff, you can see right to the ice. So very similar design there. Former Consol Energy Center, now PPG Paints Arena. For apparel, there are 2 apparel spots in the entire arena. One on the first concourse and one right above it in the second concourse. Now, I will tell you from personal experience that between the Huskies game and the Minutemen game, there was stuff that was already sold out. So even before the Huskies and the Mavericks game was over with. And I did talk to a few of those people before I left the arena. They did tell me they were getting a reshipment of some items to their spots for Saturday. But I would imagine that right when you get in the building, find it, buy it before it's gone, because it's going to be probably a limited stock, and I have no idea what they're getting in, if they're going to get in a whole bunch. And no, I think we did also, we should probably tweet up this link too. There's an online store as well for hats and some other apparel. If you aren't able to make it to the arena, make sure you get it for there as well.
Yes, there is. Nick, you want to hold up that shirt one more time for our fans here, if you could? Yeah, perfect.
So, so this is the St. Cloud State one.
Yeah,
they do have one for every team. I didn't see a North Dakota one. I'm not sure why, but I did see it. No, I did see a couple of Fighting Sioux fans there, and bless their souls, because they're a passionate fan base. But I think the golf course is 1,400 miles back to the west. But we'll leave that conversation right there. But at the end of it, again.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, Nick. I think the last thing we should clarify here before we get ready for puck drop, of course, Saturday, 6 p.m. Central Time at PPG Paints Arena. There was a question mark, obviously, about UMass and the 4 players that you're missing: Carson Geiswitz, Jerry Harding, and then Philip Lindbergh in net, as well as their backup goaltender as well. I think it's important to clarify just why they're going to be missing. Why they were out of the tournament, because I think there's some misconception about that as well. And then the final point here for you, Nick, does that change anything for the Huskies?
It does, actually. So, number one, these players that were essentially not allowed to travel team, they were sidelined because they were part of what was called contract tracing. So they themselves didn't test positive. Now, they were instructed to be quarantined. And essentially, as soon as the Minutemen won the game last night, the UMass University Communications released a statement that says, hey, these guys, they stuck with quarantine, and they've been now cleared by the NCAA. All players that were sidelined to rejoin the team. From my understanding, they were here this afternoon joining the team. So for those who say, hey, UMass, they're going to be, I would imagine that they're going to be in the roster tomorrow against the Huskies. So if you weren't impressed by that squad yesterday, there's going to be even more skill and even more firepower. I'm not quite sure if you're UMass, what that goaltending decision might look like. Yes, Lindbergh's a great goaltender, but holy cow, did Murray play one heck of a game yesterday too against the Bulldogs. So I'm not sure if you go with a hot goaltender or do you stick back in Lindbergh. Either way, he's got a good decision that he has to make there in net. And so as far as it's going to be a full strength UMass squad going against the Huskies tomorrow evening.
Yeah, playing better than the Matt Murray of Ottawa, that's for darn sure. But nonetheless, the Huskies are going to have to find a way to beat him. Like we mentioned, puck drop 6 p.m. Central Time, the national championship game of 2021, St. Cloud State versus the UMass Minutemen should be a good one, and we'll have it all for you here at the Huskies Warming House podcast. Also, just to mention at the very tail end of this as well, our showtime for the upcoming Sunday might actually kind of reflect a little bit depending on the result of the game as well. So just kind of stay tuned. We're going to try to get a show up for you in the next week, and we'll keep you updated, hopefully, here at the Huskies Warming House podcast.